She put up a bright red sold sign on my lake cabin and told my daughter we had 3 hours to leave. I wasn't even part of the HOA. I was still half asleep, still holding my coffee mug when I walked outside and saw her snapping pictures of our porch like she owned the place. "Excuse me, ma'am. Who told you you could?" I tried. But she cut me off, pointing at her clipboard. "This entire area is HOA protected. You're squatting. We've legally reclaimed the property." My hands shook. I'd built that cabin with my dad before he passed away. I owned it free and clear. No dues, no membership, no HOA, but she just smirked like she'd done this before. My wife came out 8 months pregnant, and Karen had the nerve to yell, "Ma'am, I suggest you don't stress yourself. You can file a complaint after you vacate." My daughter started crying when the tow truck backed up our gravel drive, ready to take our Jeep. "Where's your authority?" I asked. She flashed some printed badge that said, "Community Enforcement," with a blurry logo. That's when I knew something was off. I opened my garage, pulled out the old lockbox, and popped it open. Inside was every deed, every tax receipt, and a very specific exemption letter signed by the county. I hadn't needed it in years. Until today. I looked up at her, steady. "You just messed with the wrong person," I said quietly. But she didn't stop. Karen got on her radio and shouted, "We have an aggressive non-compliant. Send backup." And within 10 minutes, 2 fake cops pulled into my driveway. One had a taser in hand. I stepped back, heart racing, but I knew something they didn't. The taller one stepped out of the fake cruiser and barked, "Sir, step away from the cabin. Hands where we can see them." My wife gripped my arm. "Please, don't escalate," she whispered. But I wasn't scared. I recognized the badge the guy was wearing. It was printed from a website I'd shut down 2 years ago. I built software that tracks fraudulent agencies. I've testified in court against people like them, but I didn't say a word yet. I wanted to see how deep this went. Karen strutted over like she ran the whole county. "Arrest him for trespassing and theft of HOA property," she said with a sick kind of confidence. "He's living here illegally. This land belongs to the Lakeside Residents Trust now." That's when I snapped. "This land," I said slowly, "was bought by my father in 1988, cash. No liens, no HOA contract, and I've got the original deed and video, footage of you trespassing on private property." I pulled out my phone and showed the live security feed from my trail cams. Multiple angles of Karen breaking the gate lock 2 days ago and stapling fake notices to our door. Her face dropped for half a second, then she recovered. "Doesn't matter," she hissed. "We voted you out." The board decided. "There is no board," I said, and finally reached into my pocket and pulled out my ID, federal property and real estate. Investigator. Inactive but still valid. Her mouth opened but no words came out. That's when one of the fake officers whispered to the other, "We should go, now." But Karen wasn't done. She doubled down. "He's impersonating an officer. That's a felony. Arrest him," she screamed. The guy with the taser looked nervous. "Ma'am, we can't arrest a federal investigator." Then I said it, cold, direct, and loud enough for the neighbors who were starting to gather. "You have 5 minutes to remove that sold sign from my property, or you'll be the one behind bars." Karen's lips tightened like she was chewing glass. She didn't move. She just stood there, still clutching her clipboard until the shorter fake cop mumbled, "We're out. This isn't worth it." He turned to me, eyes low. "Look, man, we were just hired for security. We didn't know." I cut him off. "You impersonated law enforcement. That's a federal crime. And your license plates?" I turned my phone around, showing them the image captured by my driveway cam, clear as day. "Unregistered. You want to explain that to the real cops, or should I?" They ran. No excuses, no debate, just back in the fake cruiser and gone in under 30 seconds. Karen stayed. She looked stunned, like her whole face forgot how to lie. But then she did the worst thing she could have done. She walked up to my pregnant wife. "You're gonna lose this place," she spat. "People like you don't belong in this community. I'll make sure of it." My wife flinched, stepping back instinctively, and my daughter screamed, "Leave my mommy alone." That was it. I turned to Karen, voice like ice. "You just threatened my pregnant wife. In front of witnesses. On camera." She didn't blink. "You think I care? This land was part of our expansion plan for the HOA. You were supposed to get out months ago. We've already sent buyers." I laughed. Actually laughed. You mean these buyers? I pulled up another document from my inbox and held it up. I traced your so-called buyers. All of them are shell LLCs. Owned by your cousin Daniel in Arizona. Fraud. Wire fraud. Mail fraud. Pick one. Now Karen wasn't just angry, she was pale. You think this is over? She whispered. You don't know who I am. I stepped forward, looked her dead in the eyes, and said the line I knew would shatter her. No, Karen, you don't know who I am, and you're about to find out. She backed up a step, just one, but it was enough to show the shift. She was rattled. The woman who barged onto my land with fake cops and a fake sale now looked like a kid who'd been caught stealing, but she still couldn't shut her mouth. I have influence, she barked. Council members, city inspectors, you'll be drowning in fines by next week. I nodded slowly, then tapped my earpiece. Jacob, you getting all this? From inside the cabin, my cousin's voice came through the Bluetooth speaker on the porch. Crystal clear. Recording's been live since 7:02 a.m. GPS. Timestamps, voice ID, all solid. Karen's eyes twitched. Who's Jacob? Private compliance officer. Licensed, former Homeland Security Tech Division. And I paused for effect. He's married to the actual president of the County Planning Commission. Silence. Then the sound of her pen dropping to the gravel. You just trespassed, impersonated a government body, threatened a pregnant woman, submitted forged ownership documents. And guess what else? I crouched down and picked up her clipboard. The notice of sale you slapped on my door. I flipped it around. Wrong font, misspelled legal code, no notarization. It's not just fake. It's criminal. Karen's voice turned desperate. You don't understand. I had no choice. I needed this land. The HOA was promised a new community center deal. I had to... I cut her off. You wanted my land. You didn't need it. You saw no gate, no fancy car, and assumed I'd be too scared or too dumb to fight back. She finally dropped the act. Okay, fine. What do you want? Money, a public apology? I'll say whatever you need. I looked over at my daughter, now clinging to my wife's side, still scared. Then I looked back at Karen and spoke with quiet finality. What I want is for people like you to stop thinking they own everything, just because they can fake a clipboard and wear sunglasses. She opened her mouth again, but at that moment, the sound of real sirens started growing louder from the main road, and this time, they were coming for her. Karen's head whipped toward the sound like a trapped animal. Real squad cars, county-issued, blue and white, lights flashing through the trees like justice cutting through the lies. She took one step back, then another. I can explain, she muttered, mostly to herself. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, holding the fake sale notice in one hand and my daughter's tiny fingers in the other. My wife leaned against me. Calm now, steady, the kind of calm that comes when you know the truth is finally catching up to the lies. 2 officers stepped out. I recognized one of them, Deputy Reed, good man. He looked around, saw Karen, then looked at me. We got your call. You weren't kidding. Body cams on, I asked. Already rolling, he nodded. Karen instantly switched tones. He attacked me, she screamed. He's impersonating federal officials. He threatened my life and forged that deed. Reed didn't even blink. Ma'am, we've already confirmed the documents. We pulled the county records before we got here. This land doesn't fall under HOA jurisdiction. She froze. Her mouth moved, but nothing came out. The second officer stepped forward. We've also received complaints from 3 other property owners. Same MO, fraudulent eviction notices, false sales, and private security posing as law enforcement. Karen turned red, then pale again. No. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't mean harm. Ma'am, Reed said, calm but firm. You're being placed under arrest for trespassing, impersonation, attempted property fraud, and making false reports to law enforcement. The cuffs clicked like a punctuation mark at the end of her story. As they led her to the car, she looked over her shoulder. You set me up. I just shook my head. No, Karen, you set yourself up. I just hit record. My daughter whispered, Is she going to jail? I looked at her, then at my wife's tired but proud smile. Yeah, baby, she is. But as the car door shut behind Karen, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. A white envelope she'd dropped near the edge of my porch. I picked it up, and when I opened it, my blood ran cold. Inside were blueprints, not just of my cabin, but of 6 other properties along the lake. And stamped at the bottom was a signature I recognized from years ago, the same developer who tried to steal my dad's land in 2001. This wasn't just Karen. She was just the beginning. I walked back into the cabin with that envelope in my hand, heart pounding now for a whole new reason. Karen had gone too far, sure, but someone else was pulling the strings. I laid the blueprints out on the kitchen table. Each one had detailed floor plans, lot numbers, and fake HOA zoning stamps. These weren't scare tactics. This was a full-scale land grab. And right there, on the bottom of the last page, was the name I'd hoped never to see again, Lorne Whitaker. The same real estate developer who'd tried to push my father into selling this land over 2 decades ago. The same man who showed up at my dad's funeral, just to ask if I was ready to sell now. He was behind it, still trying to erase everything we built. I looked up at my cousin Jacob, who had just walked in from the back room. "It's not over," I told him. He took one glance at the blueprints and whistled low. "This is organized, coordinated, she was just the front." I nodded. "And if Whitaker's name is on this, he's breaking more than state laws. He's tapping into federal land grants. Some of these parcels are still under review for conservation status. That's felony territory." Jacob pulled out his laptop and started scanning the QR codes on the documents. "They've been setting up this scam for a while. Layered LLCs, rebranded shell companies, forged HOA bylaws. This thing's deep." My wife stepped in, hand on her belly. "What does this mean for us?" "It means," I said slowly, "they weren't just trying to steal from me. They were planning to erase the whole lakeside community and rebuild it into luxury properties. Most of these cabins belong to retired vets, farmers, families that have been here for generations." That's when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Back off. You got Karen. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." Attached was a photo of my daughter's school. I stared at the screen. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just fraud anymore, this was a threat. And now it was war. I didn't blink. I didn't show panic. But inside something snapped. Threatening my family was a line you don't come back from. I slid the phone across the table to Jacob. "Track it. I want to know where that message came from, what tower it pinged off of, and what coffee shop they stopped at on the way." He was already typing. "Got it, burner phone." But whoever sent it slipped up. Pinged a signal right outside the lakeside. "Country Club, Whitaker's private golf course." Of course, same place where Karen used to host those fake HOA brunches, bragging about cleaning up the lake. She wasn't just doing this for power. She was doing it for him. I grabbed the keys. My wife stepped in front of me. "You're not going alone." I looked at her belly. "I'm not putting you in danger." She gave me a look I hadn't seen since the night we fled a hurricane 5 years ago. "Then take someone who knows how to fight." From behind her, my neighbor Jim stepped forward. "Vietnam vet, old school. Steady hands." Heard the sirens. "Figured it was time I paid you back for fixing my generator." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an old sheriff's department badge. "You were a deputy for 22 years, he said, strapping on a belt holster. "And I don't like when people threaten kids." We drove straight to the country club uninvited. No reservations, no cover stories. Jacob stayed back, feeding me updates through the earpiece. The place looked quiet on the outside. Golf carts parked, old men sipping bourbon on porches. But beneath that calm, I could feel it, corruption dressed in khakis. We walked in through the side lounge. Whitaker was there, laughing, holding court like a king among pawns. But when he saw me, the color drained from his face. "I warned you," he said calmly, setting down his drink. "You threatened my daughter," I said, just as calm. "You should have taken the deal," he replied, waving toward the window. "This place could have been worth millions. You and your little cabin, you were in the way." I took one step closer. "This isn't about land anymore. This is about intent. I've got forged documents, 3 witnesses, camera footage, and a recorded threat sent to a federal witness. You think your golf buddies will save you from that?" He chuckled. "You won't go public. You care too much about your family's safety." That's when Jim stepped forward and tossed something onto Whitaker's lap. It was a flash drive. Jim growled. "That's every file Karen tried to delete from her laptop before she got cuffed. Guess where she backed up her data?" Whitaker's fake charm dropped, completely. "You two don't know who you're dealing with," he said darkly. Actually, I smiled, we finally do. Whitaker stood up slowly, brushing his slacks like he was still in control. Even if you expose me, nothing sticks. You think I don't have judges in my pocket? You think the county board doesn't owe me favors? He leaned in. You'll end up in court for years. And broke by the end of it. I stayed quiet for a moment, then looked down at the flash drive in his lap. That flash drive's already been sent to the state attorney's office. My cousin ran a backup to 3 cloud servers. One of them is Homeland's Property Fraud Division. Another's the local news channel. Whitaker's eyes flickered. You wouldn't dare. I smiled. I dared 20 minutes ago. Jim crossed his arms. You made a lot of enemies, Lorne. Turns out, most of the folks you bullied into silence, they're ready to talk now, especially after what you pulled with Karen. Just then, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a live stream alert, local. Channel 6 News. The anchor was standing outside the sheriff's department, holding our blueprints. Karen's mugshot flashed across the screen, under it. Breaking. HOA fraud ring exposed. Developer under criminal investigation. I turned the phone so Whitaker could see. His face collapsed. Not rage, not defiance. Just raw fear. That's not possible, he muttered. Wrong, I said. What's not possible is walking over people forever and thinking, no one's gonna push back. You didn't just mess with me. You came for my land, my family and my child. He tried to move past me, maybe to run, maybe to call someone. But the second he opened the door, 2 deputies were already standing there. Mr. Whitaker, one said calmly, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, coercion, and threats against a federal witness. As they cuffed him, I caught his eye one last time. Remember what you said? I asked him. That people like me were in the way? I leaned forward. We are the way. 2 weeks later, the entire scam unraveled. Karen cut a deal and testified. Half the so-called HOA board resigned in disgrace. All evictions were reversed. Properties restored. But more than that, our community came back stronger. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years started showing up for each other. We rebuilt what was ours. Not just the cabins, but the trust. One quiet evening, I sat on the porch with my wife and newborn son in my arms. My daughter ran barefoot by the lake, laughing. And I thought to myself, they tried to take everything. But they forgot the most important part. You don't steal land from someone who's willing to bleed for it. I didn't fight for this country. To be told I can't stand on my own porch. The end. Subscribe my YouTube channel for more stories.